The world's population is becoming increasingly urban. Sometime in 2007 is usually reckoned to be the turning point when city dwellers formed the majority of the global population for the first time in history. Today, the trend toward urbanization continues. As of 2014, it's thought that 54% of the world's population lives in cities, and it's expected to reach 66% by 2050. On completion of this module, you should be able to understand the issues of development in small towns and also understand the role of migration and growth dynamics. Migration forms a significant and often controversial part of this urban population growth. In fact, cities grow in three ways which can be difficult to distinguish, that is through migration, whether it is internal migration from rural to urban areas or international migration between countries. The natural growth of cities population and the reclassification of nearby non-urban districts. Although migration is only responsible for one share of this growth, it varies widely from country to country. In some places, particularly in poorer countries, migration is the main driver of urbanization. In 2009, UN Habitat estimated that 3 million people were moving to cities every week. In global gateway cities such as Sydney, London and New York, migrants make up over a third of the population. The proportion in Brussels and Dubai is even greater, with migrants accounting for more than half of the population. The 2015 World Migration Report, which is often called as WMR, by the International Organization for Migration, argued that this mass movement of people is widely overlooked amid the global concern about urbanization. And the report considers the widespread challenges in terms of service provision for the growing numbers of people moving into cities around the world. Where the significance of migration to cities is recognized, it is widely seen as a problem. In 2013, a UN study of all 193 UN member states found that 80% had policies to reduce rural to urban migration. This figure has risen substantially in recent decades, up from only 38% in 1996. It is also more pronounced in poorer countries. 88% of the least developed countries reported policies to reduce migration to urban areas. But this negative attitude towards migration to cities may well be mistaken. The WMR argues that problems of access to services such as housing, sanitation, education or employment that result from rural to urban migration are not inevitable. Although all socioeconomic classes are reflected in migration to cities, migrants from rural areas are disproportionately poor, and inadequate planning is often a result of a weak political will to support them. Yet, as the report pointed out, migrants are especially motivated individuals. It is not only the sheer numbers of people involved that makes migration worthy of attention. All around the world, populations of cities are now more diverse than surrounding rural areas. In this way, migrants who come to cities can help diversify the networks that the city can draw upon. For instance, by linking cities to broader global networks, perhaps the most famous example of this is East Leigh in Nairobi, known as the Little Mogadishu. This neighborhood has become a vibrant global commercial hub powered by enterprising members of the Somali, Ethiopian and the Kenyan diasporas. So, how are cities coping and changing with this influx of internal and external migrants? While the vast majority of migration policies are set on a national basis. It is increasingly common for cities to develop their own approach to integrating people who come to settle. For example, in the US, many cities support legislation calling for city police forces not to cooperate with certain forms of federal immigration control, which are deemed to be prejudiced against migrant groups. In 2012, the cities of Los Angeles and Chicago passed non-cooperation measures, and in 2014, New York City became the largest city to do so. Yet, much of the research into the impact of migrants on cities concerns international migrants in wealthier countries. A key contribution of 2015 WMR has been to turn the focus of migration to cities in poorer countries. This migration is often shorter distance from rural areas that are relatively close. Rural to city migration is a much larger movement of people at a global scale and is accompanied by a very different set of issues. Adequate housing is probably the most significant of these. Although informal settlements exist all around the world, 97% of slum dwellers live in poor countries. As per the previous discussion, we can identify the potential of small towns, but small cities have already facing a lot of deficiency of physical and social infrastructure, which is necessary to improve the quality of life. McKinsey report have already revealed the expected growth and issues of cities blow by blow and clearly analyzed the deficiencies of the various sectors. Status of water supply quantity, share of public transport, parks and open space, sewage treatment, solid waste collection and slum population is given below, and if we consider the small towns, it is far away to provide a good quality of life in upcoming smart cities. Despite all these common issues, there are some invisible factors of development in small cities which need to identify for inclusive planning. Development control norms of a city will be the decider factor for inclusive growth. So, it is a very obvious question that the development regulation should be changed or same as per the provision of municipal council, and if it will be changed, then what would be the policy to make it more inclusive. Concept of smart cities will attract the migrants from rural areas, and provision of physical and social infrastructure will provide a livable environment in small cities, but the question is still anxious that who will be the actual user of this livable environment. Today, land mafia and bureaucrats are the decision makers of land value in small towns because of inactive municipal council, and such people drum up the speculation purpose, which is a main barricade of inclusive development. Inclusive planning is still a mysterious approach for Indian cities. Not only for small towns, even metro cities are not able to deliver the policies to make inclusive development. For the migrants of rural areas, we cannot expect a rich financial background, and as per the migration patterns of India, migrants come to search a job in these cities. Smart city concept will definitely provide some job opportunities for migrants, but inclusive smart cities may be a huge scope for development towards education and small scale industries. Function of urban local body in small cities is very limited and inactive. Their frigid response of development and inadequate human resource make the whole system stagnant. Indian small towns are entirely dependent on octroi collection, where other local taxes are almost nil. Small towns are dependent on state and central funds, and in such a discordant situation, how smart city concept will be executed is a big challenge. Inefficiency of local body provide enormous opportunity to bureaucrats and politicians to mint illegally with development control violation. Such hostile forces are very difficult to subjugate, and in such conditions the concept small city is good for nothing. Analysis of NSS rounds by several authors has shown that migrants are better off than non-migrants. The NSS provides the MPC, which we usually call as monthly per capita expenditure, decile wise distribution of migrants as well as the migration rate by deciles. The migration rate is much higher in top deciles, especially for males. In fact, the rate is more than 6 times in the highest decile than in the bottom decile for males, and more than 5 times in the highest decile compared to the lowest decile for urban males. As a result, there is higher percentage of migrants in the top decile. In such case, government expectation should be obvious for smart cities, but its development should be free from fatal intentions, bureaucrat and private developers, and honestly speaking, Indian small towns are not prepared for such development. There are some issues which has been continuously overlooked from last 3 decades during planning of Indian cities. For example, the enforced policy of a city does not accountable for the future migration trends and carrying capacity of cities, and such attitude of planning is the main hurdle to estimate the growth dynamics of cities, especially for small towns. The basic considerable points of development are: number 1, land policy and requirement of housing. Housing is the most important issue which should considered before planning of a city. Provision of infrastructure is just a matter of willingness and finance of government policies, but the real crunch is provision of housing, which usually overlooked by planners. The main threats are bureaucrats and private developers who strive a lot to make land and housing unaffordable for middle class. They grab all the opportunities of people before even government plan to develop a city, and smart cities can face same situation during the development process. Coming to the second aspect, estimation of carrying capacity of cities. Planners always fail to estimate the real carrying capacity of the city, and that is why the actual development concept grow in organic manner. Planners should focus on quality of life, not in economic growth. Actual in-migration benefits have been always ignored, and the basic principle of urbanization, which is accountable for education, health and environment, is completely overlooked. Coming to third point, that is estimation of migration. From so many years, India is starving to get some elite quality of research, and that is the main hurdle of sustainable development. In the field of migration, there are very few research has been published, and due to absence of such important information, planners just overlook the migration aspect as a parameter of development. Such aspect can improve the quality of life of developing city. Government should take initiative to encourage the research on the topic of migration and then incorporate the findings of the research in policies of development. In addition to their direct roles in low wage industries such as apparel manufacturing and restaurants, immigrant service workers play supporting roles in maintaining business services and office industries in large cities. They also create jobs in the entrepreneurial and small business sectors of cities. Some evidence suggests that in addition, immigrants stimulate import and export activities and maintain international financial relationship with their home nations. A useful starting point is to compare the composition of employment in cities with large and small immigrant populations. As among any population group, immigrants affect city economies by increasing the supply of various types of workers and by increasing the demand for a variety of goods and services. The question is, what economic effect occurs as a result of greater numbers of immigrants as compared with growth among US natives? Nevertheless, when immigrants boost employment in a sector more than native born workers, concentration ratios should be positively correlated with the percentages of cities' foreign born population. Concentration ratios should be inversely related to the foreign born population if natives per employment in the sector more than do immigrants. These correlation ratios are based on 1990 employment data for the 55 cities with population of 2,50,000 or more in 1980. Industries that are positively correlated with concentrations of immigrant workers include business services, construction, non-durable and durable manufacturing, and personal services. Construction offers many low-paying blue-collar positions, particularly in non-unionized sectors such as home improvement activities. The business service industry employs both very high and low skilled people, and lower skilled immigrants provides support activities for more advanced services and corporate headquarters. Several other industries are inversely correlated with concentrations of more immigrants. These include healthcare, education, communication, and agriculture. Healthcare is especially interesting because it demonstrates the double-edged nature of an industry for immigrants. The field employs many low-skilled workers who provide personal care to the patients and perform kitchen work as well as janitorial services. However, healthcare is also expensive and often requires health insurance to be affordable. Immigrants stimulate the industry on the supply side, yet are less likely to use these services as much as natives do. Ethnic entrepreneurship is one of the most visible economic contributions by immigrants to cities. Roger Waldingner, Howard Aldrich, Robin Ward, and others argue that entrepreneurial activity among immigrants reflect differences between immigrants and US natives in economic opportunity structures and personal characteristics. The basics of their model can be illustrated among Korean immigrants. Koreans have a much higher rate of self-employment than do other immigrant groups. It has been estimated that as many as 1/3 of all Korean families own a small businesses. Barriers to opportunity in the mainstream economy influence this preference for business ownership. In addition, many Koreans have considerable difficulty with English, and racial and cultural differences may generate discrimination against them. Several characteristics of Korean immigrants enhance their ability to own and operate successfully businesses. These include high skill and education levels, the ability to mobilize several types of resources including capital, close ties to home country producers of goods, strong kinship and cultural networks, and inexpensive labor sources. Successful immigrant entrepreneurs generally identify market niches in which they can operate profitably. Minority neighborhoods are often undeserved, and existing businesses can be acquired from earlier entrepreneurs who wish to retire or move. Immigrant owned businesses also cluster in economic sectors. For example, Jin Yoon found that Koreans in Chicago owned 66% of all laundry businesses. Some ethnic business owners focus on meeting the needs of their ethnic communities, such as the demand for Chinese herbal medication. Based on various rounds of national sample survey, the migration rate indicate that internal migration is higher in million plus cities, followed by middle and smaller towns. Migration towards rural areas was lower and very stable. The last NSS data of 2007 and 8 shows migration has increased compared to previous NSS rounds data. This shows that economic opportunities are much better in million plus cities. The female migration was observed much higher in all areas, as about 2/4 of female reported as migrants as compared 1/10 of male migrants. Female recorded increase in migration rate during the last NSS round, which can be attributed to women educational and economic migration towards million plus cities. In NSS 64th round, million plus cities are urban areas having population more than 10 lakhs. Below population 10 lakhs is considered urban towns, and less than 10 lakh population and all rural areas are considered as rural. In earlier NSS rounds, town size were classified into million cities, town of class 2, that is between 50,000 to 10 lakh population, and class town 3, that is between below 50,000 population, and rural areas as rural. Economic status of a household generally indicated by income level or per capita income. In NSS, income data is not collected. The data on monthly per capita expenditure, which we also called as MPCE, can be used as proxy of income level. The data on MPCE is correlated with migration status of household. The figure provides the migration rate in different size class areas and gender. It may be observed that during 2007-8, the migration rate towards million cities was much higher for male and female, followed by other town and rural areas in all MPCE classes. The female migration rate recorded nearly 3 to 4 times higher rate than males. Another interesting observation shown is migration rate increases by MPCE class. The lowest MPCE class shows lower rate as compared to the higher MPCE classes. The internal migration data in India shows that it is higher economic class is more mobile than poor and lower economic status group. After the analysis of all issues, there is some very explicit finding and some questions are still unanswered, like who would be the actual user of smart cities? Are local bodies of small towns prepared to handle the migration towards smart cities? Did concept of smart city will able to improve the HDI, which we call as Human Development Index? In 2018, the HDI rank of India was 130 out of 189 countries, and in 2019 it was 129 out of 189 countries. The National Commission of Rural Labour, which we call it as NCRL report in 1991, described the probability of migrants and suggests that labourers and farmers with little or no land have a high propensity to migrate as a seasonal labour. So, if cities are not affordable, it will create slums which degrade the quality of life. These are the main points which are responsible for India's bottom line position in HDI ranking. Migration to cities significantly contributes to urbanization, and if well planned, migration can enhance the dynamism of cities, making them healthier, more profitable and more interesting places to live.